Hello, everybody, and welcome to this lecture number 10. And today we're going to talk about writing your reference page. You'll have to go ahead and do that as one of your assignments for this unit. And so I want to talk about the details of how one goes about making up a reference page. So one of the things that we're going to pay attention to right now is the fact that with your lit review paper, you're pretty much restricted to using your 4 journal articles. And so I want to particularly focus on peer-reviewed journal articles, citation, and how you do that. But for your other courses, perhaps in psychology and in other areas where you have to write an APA lit review paper, it may not just be restricted to journal articles. You may be citing websites or books or any number of other things. And so certainly your textbook will say a lot about this, and I want to, in this lecture, at least allude to that and point out some of the things that you should pay attention to. Here is what a reference page should look like at the end of your paper. The reference page always is a page of its own. You don't start the references in the middle of the page after your paper is done. It always starts on a completely brand new page. You can see up in the left is what we call the running head. We'll talk about that in our next lecture. But the reference page pretty much starts with references. That's all you put. Don't put works cited or bibliography. You just put references. And then list your references double spaced with no extra space anywhere, in alphabetical order. And so this would be what a reference page should look like. The one thing you should pay attention to is this is not realistic because there should be 1-inch margins. So I've just made it a little larger so you can see it. But you can see that we start with the reference that is first in the alphabet, and we put the author's names. With regard to the author's names, never change the order. The names of the authors on a particular journal article are there for a particular purpose, so you should not alphabetize the author's names within a journal title. Usually the first author is the one that is called the primary author and the one that put the most work in. But you can see that you cite the last name of the author, followed by a comma, and then followed by 1 or 2 initials. Followed by a comma, second author, again, and however many authors there are. In a reference page, you never use the word and. So, for instance, when we're looking at Cummings, JN, comma, Butler, comma, B, period, comma, and so on and so forth, this thing right here is called an ampersand, and it is used instead of the word and in a reference page. Now, once you finish looking at the author's name, you put a space, and then you put the year of publication in parentheses, followed by a period, and then a space. And then you write the name of the journal article. Now, one thing that drives us a little crazy, because when we were in high school, perhaps we learned to make up a bibliography or works cited page, and the title of the article was pretty much put in caps. That is not true for APA style. You can see here for this first one, the name of this title is The Quality of Online Social Relationships. We capitalize, of course, the first, but all the other words in the journal title are not capitalized. Let me emphasize that they're not capitalized. The only exception to that would be something like Friendships Through IM. IM stands for instant messaging, and that is clearly put in caps because it stands for something like FBI or CIA. The only other words that you capitalize are for proper nouns. So for instance, if this first one said the quality of online social relationships in Seoul, Korea, you're going to certainly capitalize Seoul and Korea because they're proper nouns. Or the quality of online social relationships in followers of Freud and Jung. Freud and Jung are going to be capitalized because they are proper nouns. So one exception to this is you can look at the third one here, Tidwell, LC, and Walther, JB, computer-mediated communication effects on disclosure, impressions, and interpersonal evaluations. And you can see down here we have a colon. Whenever you have a colon in the title of your article, the next word after the colon is always capitalized. So G, getting, would be capitalized, but again, to know one another in a bit of time, not capitalized. The title of the journal article is followed by a period, then a space, and then the journal in italics. When you're putting the journal article, don't use any abbreviations. You do not capitalize the word of, or the word the, or the word and. Only capitalize the journal of this, that, and the other thing. And then that is followed by a comma, still in italics, and then the volume number, also in italics. Now, some journal articles have this 7 right here, or this 1, or this 3. It would be not the volume number, but the issue number. Some journals have that, and some journals don't. If it doesn't have that, you just follow by the volume number, say 45 right here, followed by a comma, and then you have the page numbers. You don't put page, don't put P period, don't put PP period, just list the number of the first page of the journal article and the last one. And that is the essence of how you should come up with a reference page. Remember to be very, very careful not to put any extra space in between your journal articles. This should all be simply double spaced. Also, you put the first author's name flush with your margin. That's a 1-inch margin. And then the second and subsequent lines are indented. It's called a hanging indent, 5 spaces. And so essentially, this is how it should look with your reference page. Now, I wanted to go over that while I was looking at a reference page, but some of these other slides will just be reiterating what I already said. You type the word references at the top of the new page and you center it. And again, don't put that in bold. Don't put that in a bigger font, a smaller font. Don't put that in italics. Just write references and then double space and start writing your first reference. Again, if you look at your reference page, it should be simply double spaced. There should be no extra spaces, for instance, between the entries and the indentation. The first line is flush left, and then subsequent lines, the second and third and fourth and fifth, if you need to, have a 5-space hanging indent. Now again, we use the last name, and this is in italics. I just wanted to emphasize it, but the last name followed by a comma, a space, and 1 or 2 letters that stand for the first and or second name. That's really up to you. Some articles may have 2 or 3 authors named Smith or Wang or something like that. So very often the second letter is used to distinguish authors with the same last name. One of the reasons why we don't use names in the reference page, just the letters representing the first and or second name and sometimes the third name, is because of, believe it or not, sexism. Years and years ago, when perhaps the field of psychology was more sexist, if there was a female name, for instance, this was Smith and it was a woman named Randi Smith, R-A-N-D-I, because psychologists, at least some, were sexist, the presence of a female name might have caused certain people to dismiss the research because a woman wrote it. I know it's crazy to think that way, but they got rid of all gender identifying names and just used these letters, just because the gender of the author shouldn't indicate how valuable this is. It should be the value of the research. Now, the full name of authors is on the front page, on the title page, and so we're not trying to deny anybody's gender identification, but that's why we just use letters instead of names. Never include titles in the reference page. So sometimes you'll look at a journal article and it'll say, Randy Smith, comma, MD or PhD. Sometimes, for instance, Roman Catholic priests who are authors will have after the name, comma, SJ, which stands for Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. You simply want the last name and one or two initials. Nothing else should go on your reference page. Now, when there's articles with 7 or fewer authors, you want to list all of the authors' names in a row, again, starting with the first author and going to the last author. There's a little wrinkle here. For authors that have 8 or more, or articles that have 8 or more authors, what you do is you list the first 6 names, and then followed by 3 periods, and then the last author. So you can see this journal article that you guys wrote. Congratulations. Flores Gilo, sorry, I misspelled your name, Isenko, Leet, Park, Parecki, and then after the J, for Jeremiah Parecki, J. Parecki, again 3 periods, followed by the author's last name. That would be J. Phillip or Justin Phillip, 2018. And again, you can see that the name of our article is called Psychology Research Skills. Psychology is capitalized, but research and skills aren't. And then a period followed by a space, followed by our journal, NIAC NYC Journal of Stuff, comma, 12. That stands for volume 12. We don't have a number here, and then it'd be pages 144 to 148. So again, you can see here's our references. This is repeating itself here a little bit. I want to encourage you, if you have any questions whatsoever, that the place pretty much every single person goes, the authoritative site, is this Purdue OWL website. Anyone that has an argument as to what is truly APA style, this, for whatever reason, has become the authority on where to go. And so if you have any question on how to cite, you'll see that the link here is not only contained in your course materials, but in this PowerPoint. And again, to reiterate what I've said, the references is at the top, double space, no extra space. The first line of each reference is flush left, followed by hanging indents for second and subsequent lines. And the order of the references is alphabetical. Again, this just is reiterating what I'm saying in terms of the author's last name, Smith, comma, J, period, Q, period. The first letter of the title, subtitle, is capitalized. None others, with the exception of colons and periods and proper nouns. And then again, just a little wrinkle here, you do not capitalize the first letter of the second word for a hyphenated compound word. So if I had some compound word in text, let's say, that if the name of my title was called In-Text Citations, the IN would be, the I would be capitalized, but text after the hyphen would not be. So the perfectly formatted paper, colon, how the Purdue OWL saved my essay. Again, Purdue and OWL, OWL, are capitalized. Purdue because it's a proper noun, it's the name of a university. OWL because it's an acronym like FBI or CIA or NASA or something else like that. You can see that when we have books, you'll be able to look up the books. but we never use underlining. We never use quote marks for journal articles or essays in any edited set of essays. It's really, really straightforward. If and when you go to do your reference page, not for this class but for another class, I would encourage you to do what I always do, because I forget this stuff if I don't use it constantly, and I just go to Purdue Lal and I look up how to cite a journal article, how to cite a book, how to cite a book of essays, if I'm just citing one essay in a book of collection of essays, how to cite a conversation, how to cite anything. The Purdue OWL site is going to have that for you. I am not a fan of APA style. It just seems like crazy and a little bit OCD, but it is what we in psychology use in papers. And again, here is the page. I would just encourage you to click on that link in the middle of this page, the Purdue OWL site, and look up resources. There's just about everything you ever need to write an APA paper. I'm constantly referring back to that. And so that's the way I would encourage you to do it. You don't have to memorize all this stuff. Obviously, you need to know that for this course, but in future semesters when you're writing other papers, just go to the Purdue website for your basics. Here, this slide, unfortunately, is pretty much saying the same thing as I said before. The capitalization rule in APA, again, for the article title, we capitalize the first word of a title, the first word of a subtitle, and proper nouns. So here's an example: computer mediated. And remember, the mediated, the M in mediated is not capitalized because it is the second word of a term which uses a hyphen. Computer mediated communication effects on disclosures, impressions, and interpersonal evaluations, colon, getting to know one another in a little bit of time. The getting, the G in getting is capitalized. Now, when we cite a book that has been printed, again, the author is the same, space, and then the year, period, space, and then we italicize for a book the name of the book, but you can see that the name of the book uses the same rules that the journal article titles use. We capitalize the first word of the title of the book, and then the first word after a colon. We follow that by a period and a space, the place the book was published, the city, followed by a comma, space, and then the state or the country, followed by a colon, a space, and then the publisher with a period. For an ebook, it's very, very similar. Again, last name, comma, first and second initial. And again, the title you have in italics, and then retrieved from wherever you got that ebook from, the website or however you cite that. In terms of chapters or books, entries from a reference book, for instance, a textbook or an edited set of essays or any number of those things like that, here is how we'd cite it. The author of the article, followed by the year, the title of the article, and you may notice that the title of the chapter or the essay is not italicized. Then that's followed by a period, a space, and then you want to put in space the first initial or first two initials of the editor or editors, followed by a space. And don't forget to use not the word and here, but ampersand. And then in parentheses, if you have an editor, it's just ed period and then close parentheses. Or if you have 2 or 3 or 4 editors, eds period close parentheses, followed by a comma, a space, and then the name of the book or collection of essays in italics. And again, we use the same rules. The St. Martin's, the is capitalized because it's the first word, but St. Martin's is capitalized because it's a proper noun. And then afterwards, again, we go back to the rule not using capitals in the title. and then you follow that by a space, and in parentheses, italicized, P period, or if it's just one page, P period 48, or PP dot period space, and then simply the length of the essay or whatever you're citing, followed by a period, and then again the place in which the book was published, and then the publisher. You may notice that there are standard state ways we refer to state. So New Jersey is NJ, not N period J period, even though it's two letters. Pennsylvania is PA. New York is NY. Massachusetts is MA. North Carolina is NC with no periods. It's the standard usage that is used here. Again, we're back to journal articles, which is what your reference page is going to look like when you hand it in to me in this unit. And just to reiterate, this is the order, the author's names, last name, and then followed by one or two of the first letters of their first and second name. Year of publication, followed by the article title of the journal in italics, and the volume number. In parentheses is the issue or number of the journal, if that's available, and then the page numbers. And if your journal article has a DOI number, you should include that, and you can find that on the journal article. If not, just leave that alone. So here is a good idea to just beat you with a dead horse here, because we've been giving you the example. Huang Bo, G, Lee, J, and Kim, 2013. Efficacy, blah, 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 blah. Technology and healthcare. And again, please remember, we use the ampersand in the author list of authors, and we use the ampersand in the journal title here. And then the DOI number that would be available on this. If we go back, I'm trying to look for the DOI number. The DOI number is right there, DOI 10 dot so on and so forth. If your journal article has that, include that. If it doesn't have it, then don't worry about it. Government reports are a little bit different. The United States government publishes a huge amount of articles and reports every year, as does Congress and the Senate. And again, this is how you do government reports: the author, and then the title of the work, and then the report number, and then the location. Usually it's Washington, D.C., and the National Institute of Health or whatever. Basically, if you get a government report, follow this standard or this paradigm. If you're a little confused, again, go to Purdue OWL and look up government reports, and it'll give you any details if there's wrinkles in how you do things. Here's just a classic example. Unfortunately, there is an error here. That should be retrieved from, and there should be a space between from and HTTP. So this would be a website in which you downloaded a government report. A page from a website, again, might be common in papers you write. This is how one might look like. And again, these are so, in order to try and remember all this and memorize all this, this is what it would look like. But and I know I'm repeating myself here, if I could encourage you to go to Purdue OWL and just look up the variations from different types of websites and so on. So go to it, do your reference page, and I wish you all the best. Give me a really, really good reference page. This is a good thing to learn. It will serve you well in the future.